They thought she would bleed out before sunset. They were wrong, because a human noticed her. On the scorched plains of Karos 9, where 3 suns burned the land into cracked stone, a lone figure lay half buried in ash and glass sand. Her breathing was shallow. One leg bent the wrong way. Dark violet blood had dried into the ground beneath her, already turning to powder in the heat. The wind howled over her body like a predator waiting its turn. Her name was Celira Thane, once a political heir of the Kevery clans. Now she was nothing. Stripped of rank. Stripped of protection. Punished for one crime only, she had said no. The Kevery did not forgive defiance, especially from one born to be traded. Her refusal to accept an arranged bonding with a war commander from the Iron Moons had embarrassed powerful elders. So they made an example of her. They beat her in public. Broke her leg. Cracked her ribs. Then they dragged her beyond the city shields and left her beneath alien suns, where nothing survived long. Celira drifted between consciousness and darkness. Every breath burned. Her thoughts were slow, scattered. She remembered cold ceremonial halls. Voices arguing about honor. Her mother's silence. The moment she realized no one would stop what was happening. The sky blurred. Then came a sound that did not belong. Footsteps. Heavy. Uneven. Crunching across glassed sand. Celira barely had the strength to open her eyes. Through the haze, she saw a shadow fall over her face, blocking the sun's, cooling her skin just enough to feel strange. "Hey," a voice said. Low. "Human. You're still alive. That's inconvenient, for whoever did this." She tried to speak. Nothing came out but a weak hiss. The human knelt beside her. He smelled of metal, dust, and something sharp like fuel. His armor was mismatched, scarred by old fights. A faded earth emblem was scratched into his shoulder plate. One sleeve was burned through, patched with tape and wire. He didn't hesitate. A canteen appeared at her lips. Cool liquid touched her mouth. She flinched, then drank, desperate despite the pain. Water spilled down her chin as she coughed, lungs struggling to remember their job. "Slow," the human said gently. "I've got you." No one had said that to her in a very long time. She focused on his face. He was older than most soldiers she'd seen. Lines marked his skin. One eye was cybernetic, glowing faint amber. The other watched her carefully, not with hunger or fear, but calculation mixed with concern. "Name's Eli Ward," he said. "Independent surveyor. Which is a fancy way of saying I get paid to walk into places sane people avoid." Her lips trembled. "Why, help?" Eli looked around at the empty wasteland. "Because leaving someone to die like this is wrong. And because humans have a habit of making bad situations worse for bad people." He scanned the horizon, then swore under his breath. "You're lucky," he added. "Storms coming. Acid wind. If it hits you like this, you're gone." He slid an arm under her shoulders and lifted her with care. Celira screamed despite herself. Pain exploded through her body, bright and blinding. "I know," Eli said softly. "I know. Hold on." He carried her toward a distant ridge where a half-buried structure jutted from the ground, an old listening post abandoned decades ago. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of ozone and burning minerals. Inside the shelter, Eli laid her on a thermal sheet and sealed the door just as the first drops of corrosive rain began to hiss against the metal walls. He worked fast. A splint made from tool braces. Medfoam injected into her leg. Painkillers, human strength, borderline illegal in half the galaxy. Celira gasped as sensation dulled, the agony fading into a heavy ache. She stared at the ceiling, chest rising and falling, alive despite everything. "You shouldn't exist anymore," she whispered. Eli glanced at her. "Funny thing. Humans get told that a lot." Hours passed. The storm raged outside, screaming like something alive. Inside the shelter, heat lamps hummed softly. Celira drifted in and out of sleep. When she woke again, the suns were lower. Eli sat across from her, cleaning a rifle that looked older than most starships. "They'll come," she said quietly. The elders. Or the war commander. They won't let this go. Eli didn't look surprised. Good. Saves me the trouble of finding them. She turned her head, studying him. You don't understand what you're stepping into. The Keveri control this system. They erase people. Eli snapped the rifle closed and met her gaze. So did a lot of empires, he said. Didn't work out long term. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Why did you refuse? He asked. Celera swallowed. Because my life is not a treaty. Eli nodded once, as if that settled everything. Then you picked the right species to collapse next to, he said. Humans have a long tradition of hating systems that treat people like objects. Outside, engines roared in the distance. Search craft. Celera's heart raced. They are here. Eli stood, calm and focused. He checked the shelter's power readings, then pulled a small device from his pack, an old human transmitter, scratched and modified beyond recognition. Good, he said. I was hoping they'd hurry. What are you doing? She asked. Eli smiled, but there was no humor in it now, only resolve. Calling friends. Humans don't travel alone anymore. The shelter shook as something heavy passed overhead. Celera realized then that the people who left her to die had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed no one would care. They had never met humanity. And far above Caro's 9, unknown ships had begun to change course. The next thing Celera heard was laughter through a loudspeaker. It crackled with static, harsh and proud, as if the speaker enjoyed the sound of fear. Outside the listening post, engines hovered low, throwing sand and ash against the metal walls. Shadows moved across the small windows like hunting beasts circling a wounded animal. Eli Ward didn't flinch. He simply turned the volume down on the receiver he'd rigged, as if someone insulting him was an annoying advertisement. Celera pushed herself up on one elbow. Pain still lived in her ribs, but the human medicine made it distant, like a memory instead of a knife. You shouldn't move, Eli said without looking away from the scanner. They'll break in, she whispered. They'll try. The loudspeaker buzzed again. Celera Thane, a voice called in the Keveri tongue. You will crawl out and beg forgiveness. You will accept the bond. Or your death will be made useful. Celera's stomach tightened. That voice belonged to Commander Varsken, the chosen mate her elders had promised her to. A war leader from the Iron Moons. Famous for winning battles by leaving survivors alive, just long enough to tell others what he did to them. Eli tilted his head, as if listening to the tone, not the words. That your guy? He asked. That's him, Celera said, her voice flat with shame and anger. Eli sighed. He's got the voice of someone who thinks the universe owes him obedience. Celera's hands trembled. He'll burn this place. He has authority. Eli finally looked at her. Authority isn't magic. It's just what people agree to fear. Before Celera could answer, the metal door shuddered. Something slammed into it. A second hit followed, harder. The lock groaned. Eli stepped to the door and pressed a small pad to the frame. A soft chirp sounded. He set a thin strip of grey paste around the seam. Quick, practiced movements. Celera stared. What is that? Old Earth trick, Eli said. Reactive bonding gel. Hardens like rock when it meets air. He wiped his fingers on his pants. They can knock for a while. Outside, the voices grew louder. Boots crunched on glassed sand. Tools scraped. Someone hammered. Celera's heart pounded. You're delaying them. But why? You can still leave. You owe me nothing. Eli walked back to his pack and pulled out a second device, smaller than the transmitter, but heavier. It looked like a broken piece of machinery with wires wrapped like veins around its core. He set it gently on the floor between them. Because, he said, humans have a rule. Not official. Not written down. But it's in our bones. Celera watched him. When someone tries to make a person into property, Eli continued, we get stubborn. The door shook again. The gel held. Through the tiny window, Celera saw Kevri raiders gathering, tall, armored, their skin like polished stone in shades of deep violet and grey. Their helmets had narrow slits that made them look like predators with no eyes. They carried shock spears and plasma cutters. And at their center stood Commander Varsken. He was larger than the others, his armor decorated with pale bone markings, trophies Celera knew. He lifted his hand, and the raiders stopped. He turned toward the listening post slowly, like a man who enjoyed taking his time. Then he spoke again, this time in trade language, so Eli could understand. "Human," Varsken called. "Step away. This is Kevri law. That female is clan-bound. She belongs to the Iron Moons. You are interfering." Celera felt her throat tighten at the word belongs. Eli leaned close to the window and answered calmly. "Yeah, see, that's where we disagree." Varsken's posture changed. A slight tilt of the head. "Curiosity. You are a lone offworlder. You cannot fight a clan." Eli smiled, small and sharp. "I'm not alone." As if on cue, Eli's transmitter let out a short beep. A signal received. Celera's eyes widened. They answered. Eli checked the screen. They did. Outside, Varsken raised his hand again. A raider stepped forward with a plasma cutter, placing the glowing edge against the door. The gel began to smoke. Celera's chest tightened. "Eli." "Stay behind me," Eli said, stepping between her and the door. He didn't sound heroic. He sounded annoyed, like a mechanic dealing with a broken engine. The cutter whined. The metal door glowed red. Then the world outside changed. A deep, rolling thunder shook the air. Not from the storm, which had passed, but from the sky itself. The raiders paused. Varsken's head snapped upward. Celera followed his gaze through the window. A ship was descending. Not a Kevri craft. Human-made. It came down like a falling star, sleek and dark, with engines that roared like wild animals. It didn't hover politely. It slammed into the sand a half-kilometer away, throwing up a wall of dust. The raiders stumbled back, startled. And then, more lights appeared above. Another ship. Then another. A small fleet. Celera's breath caught. "How?" Eli's voice was calm. "Humans are everywhere. You just don't notice us until it's too late." Varsken barked orders. Raiders scrambled, weapons raised toward the sky. A ramp dropped from the first human ship, and figures marched out, humans in exoframes, carrying heavy weapons and shield packs. Their armor wasn't polished. It was practical, scratched, patched, and clearly used. Not ceremonial soldiers. Professionals. At their front walked a woman with a shaved head and a long coat over her gear. She held a tablet in one hand and a rifle in the other, like both were equally important. She stopped, surveyed the raiders, and then spoke into an amplifier. "This is Captain Mara Cade of the independent human vessel Cinder Knife," she said. "We received a distress signal from Eli Ward. Any of you want to explain why you're hunting an unarmed civilian?" Varsken stepped forward, proud again. "This is not your matter, human. Leave. Or be removed." Captain Cade laughed once, short, without joy. "Removed by who?" "You." She tapped her tablet. "I'm reading multiple violations of interspecies conduct. Forced bonding. Assault. Attempted execution without trial." Varsken's voice sharpened. "Our laws." "Don't care," Mara said simply. The words hung in the hot air like a blade. Varsken's eyes flicked to the human fleet above. Then to the exoframed soldiers on the sand. Then back to the listening post, as if realizing his prey had become a trap. Eli stepped out of the listening post, hands visible, but his rifle was slung ready. Celera stayed in the doorway, half supported by the wall. When Varsken saw her alive, rage twisted his face. Celera met his gaze and forced her voice to carry. "I refuse you," she said. "I refused before. I refuse now." Varsken moved toward her instinctively. and every human weapon clicked. The sound was soft, but it was like a promise. Varsken stopped. Captain Cade looked at Celera. Her expression softened just a little. "You're the one they tried to bury." Celera swallowed. "Yes." Mara nodded, then turned back to Varsken. "Here's how this goes. You step away. You take your raiders home. And you tell your elders that if they keep doing this, humans will show up every time. And next time, we won't be so polite." Varsken's mouth tightened. He was calculating now, measuring pride against survival. "You think you can control us," he said. Eli answered before Mara could. "No. We think we can stop you." Varsken's eyes narrowed at the human. "This female will bring war." Eli's amber cyber eye glinted. "Then you should have thought about that before you tried to make her a prisoner." Varsken raised his hand slowly. Celera's muscles tensed. But instead of signaling attack, he signaled retreat. The raiders backed away in tight formation. Pride held their posture, but fear lived in their steps. Varsken didn't leave immediately. He stared at Celera as if carving her into memory. "This is not finished," he said. Celera's voice was steady. "It is for me." Varsken turned and walked away. The hovercraft lifted off, engines roaring, and the raiders vanished into the shimmering distance. Silence fell. Celera swayed, and Eli caught her before she fell. Captain Mara Cade approached, eyes scanning Celera's injuries. "Eli," she said, "you always find trouble." Eli shrugged. "Trouble finds me. I just don't ignore it." Mara looked at Celera again. "You're safe now. For tonight, at least." Celera stared at the humans. Scratched armor, tired faces, steady hands. "You came for me," she said quietly, almost disbelieving. Captain Cade's voice softened, but it stayed firm. "We came because you're a person. And humans, we have a problem with people being treated like objects." Celera felt something crack inside her, not bone, not pain, but the wall of hopelessness she'd carried for so long. She wasn't alone anymore. But she also knew the truth. Varsken would not accept humiliation, and the elders would not forgive a public refusal backed by outsiders. This was only the beginning. Far away, on the Iron Moons, Varsken would return with plans and weapons meant to crush human interference. And when that moment came, humanity would do what it always did when faced with impossible odds. They would improvise. They would adapt. They would win in ways no one expected. Because humans didn't just fight with force. They fought with ideas. And ideas were far more dangerous. The human ships did not leave Karos 9. That fact alone sent shockwaves through the Kevry system. Instead of retreating after the confrontation, the Cinderknife and her sister ships settled into a loose orbit. They did not threaten. They did not fire weapons. They simply stayed, silent, patient, and very human in their refusal to go away. Celera watched them from the observation deck, her legs still wrapped in healing mesh, her body weaker than it had ever been, yet her spirit burning hotter than before. For the first time in her life, the future was not already decided by someone else. Eli stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes on the stars. "They're arguing right now," he said. "Elders, commanders, lawyers. Everyone hates it when humans show up without asking." "Why?" Celera asked. "Because we don't play the same games," Eli replied. "We don't respect traditions that hurt people. And we don't fight the way others expect." Below them, in the ship's hangar, humans worked, not preparing for a battle the Kevry understood, but building something else entirely. Engineers modified cargo drones. Programmers rewrote navigation software. Mechanics welded strange, asymmetrical structures onto shuttle hulls. Celera had asked Captain Mara once what they were building. Mara's answer had been simple. Options. The Kevry response came 3 days later. A formal transmission from the Council of Clans filled the main screen. Elder faces appeared, ancient, stern, offended by the mere existence of humans in their space. "You harbor a criminal," one elder said. "She violated binding law." Celera stood beside Eli, refusing to hide. She violated ownership, Captain Mara replied calmly. There's a difference. The elders bristled. Your species does not understand our culture. Mara nodded. We understand it just fine. We just don't accept it. The transmission ended with threats, economic sanctions, military retaliation, spiritual curses that meant nothing to humans. Eli exhaled slowly. Yeah. That went about how I expected. Celera looked at him. They will come with force. They already are, Eli said. Sensors confirmed it hours later. Iron Moon warships began to move. Not toward the human fleet directly, but toward nearby trade lanes, stations, and neutral colonies. A pressure tactic. A way to show strength without direct conflict. They're trying to make you leave, Celera said bitterly. Mara shook her head. No. They're trying to make us react. So what do humans do? Celera asked. Mara smiled, sharp, thoughtful. We do something worse. What followed confused every intelligence service in the sector. Human ships split up instead of forming a battle line. They moved into trade space, into communication hubs, into data relays. They didn't attack anything. They talked. Human diplomats streamed messages in dozens of languages, sharing evidence of Celera's attempted execution. Medical scans. Witness accounts. Kevery legal records pulled from black market archives. Human hackers, unofficial, deniable, very effective, opened old files and quietly leaked them to neutral worlds. Stories spread. A noblewoman beaten for refusing marriage. A system that treated lives like currency. A council that punished choice. The Kevery had ruled through silence for centuries. Humans shattered it in days. Trade guilds began asking questions. Neutral species demanded investigations. Smaller clans within the Kevery system grew nervous. Anger replaced confidence. Commander Varsken returned to the Iron Moons furious and humiliated. He stood before the council, armor repaired but pride cracked. The humans poison minds, he snarled. They make lies sound like truth. An elder hissed. Then crush them. Varsken smiled grimly. I intend to. The trap was set carefully. A distress beacon appeared near a mining outpost, human-coded, urgent, panicked. A small human shuttle drifted nearby, its hull scorched, engines failing. Too easy. Eli stared at the sensor readout aboard the cinder knife. They're watching to see if we take the bait. Mara folded her arms. We will. Celera's breath caught. That's suicide. No, Mara said. That's teaching. The shuttle carried no weapons. No shields. Just a skeleton crew and something hidden deep in its cargo hold. When Varsken's warship intercepted it, he felt victory for the first time since the desert. Board them, he ordered. Take the human alive. Kevery soldiers cut into the shuttle and stormed inside. And found nothing. No crew. No fear. No resistance. Then the lights went out. The shuttle exploded, not outward, but inward. A controlled implosion that collapsed spacetime just enough to trap Varsken's boarding party in a gravity well they couldn't escape. Not a weapon of mass destruction. A weapon of humiliation. Across the sector, every human channel lit up. Captain Mara's voice carried clearly. This is a demonstration. Not an attack. We can do worse. We choose not to. Varsken roared in rage aboard his warship as his elite soldiers vanished from sensors, alive, but imprisoned in a pocket of warped space that would release them in exactly 12 hours, unharmed. The message was unmistakable. Humans could strike anywhere. Humans could stop anytime. Humans were choosing restraint. Celera watched the aftermath in silence. They could have killed them, she said. Yes, Eli replied. But then they'd call us monsters. This way, they call us unpredictable. She nodded slowly. That's more dangerous. The council panicked. Pressure mounted from within. Smaller clans broke ranks. Trade slowed. Allies questioned loyalty. And Celera, once discarded, became a symbol. Not of rebellion. Of choice. Eli found her later, standing alone in the observation bay. "You okay?" he asked. She took a breath. "My people are changing. And they hate me for it." Eli leaned against the wall. "Yeah. That happens when someone survives what they weren't supposed to." She turned to him. "What happens next?" Eli's expression grew serious. "Varsken won't stop. He'll try one last thing. Something big. Something brutal." Celera's jaw tightened. "Then let him come." Eli smiled, proud. "That's the spirit." Far away, in the shadow of the iron moons, Varsken stood before a massive structure, an ancient weapon platform long forbidden by treaty. He placed his hand on its cold surface. "If humans want a lesson," he growled, "I will give them one written in fire." And for the first time since humanity reached the stars, an entire sector held its breath. Because the final choice was coming. Not just for Celera, but for everyone who believed a life could be owned. The iron moons burned brighter than they had in centuries. Ancient engines groaned as the forbidden platform awakened, drawing power from reactors never meant to be used again. The weapon was old, older than most Kevri traditions, but that made it terrifying. It had been built in a time when mercy was weakness and extermination was policy. Commander Varsken stood on the command dais, staring at the growing sphere of energy forming between the platform's prongs. It pulsed like a living heart. "Target," he said coldly. "Human fleet. All of it." His officers hesitated. "To fire this weapon," one said carefully, "will violate every interstellar compact. Even our allies." "They will fear us," Varsken snapped. "And fear is obedience." Across the system, alarms screamed aboard human ships. Captain Mara Cade didn't shout. She didn't panic. She simply looked at the incoming data and nodded once. "So," she said quietly, "he chose the stupid option." Eli stood beside her, eyes narrowed. "That weapon could wipe us out." "Yes," Mara agreed. "If we fight like everyone else." Celera gripped the railing behind them. Her chest felt tight, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing this was happening because of her. "This is my fault," she said. Eli turned to her sharply. "No. This is what happens when someone finally says no." The human fleet did not form up. They scattered. To the Kevri tacticians watching from afar, it looked like panic. Ships broke orbit. Some accelerated toward nearby asteroid fields. Others dove toward gas giants or slipped behind moons. Varsken smiled. "Cowards," he said. "Fire." The weapon discharged. Space itself bent. A wave of annihilating force tore through the void, swallowing everything in its path: asteroids, debris, radiation, even light. And it hit nothing important. The human ships were gone. Not destroyed. Gone. In that same instant, every Kevri system experienced something far more unsettling. Human signals appeared everywhere. Inside shipyards. Inside defense networks. Inside financial systems. Inside archives thought untouchable. Not viruses. Messages. Translated perfectly. "We are here. We see you. And we are choosing restraint. Again." Panic spread. "How are they doing this?" An elder screamed from the council chamber. "They aren't attacking," another whispered. "They're embarrassing us." Because humans weren't using brute force. They were using connectivity. Long before this confrontation, humanity had done what it always did best: prepared quietly. They had mapped Kevri infrastructure, not to destroy it, but to understand it. They learned how energy moved, how information flowed, how fear spread. And now they used it. Human ships reappeared, briefly, near dozens of Kevri worlds, transmitting proof that the Iron Moons had fired a forbidden weapon first. Legal records. Sensor logs. Elder signatures authorizing it. The Kevri people saw the truth in real time. Protests erupted. Clans argued openly for the first time in generations. Trade halted entirely. Crews refused orders. Varsken roared in fury. Fire again. A technician shook in place. Commander, the platform is offline. Varsken turned slowly. What? Human interference, the technician whispered. They didn't destroy it. They rewrote it. Across the galaxy, Captain Mara spoke again, her voice broadcast everywhere. This ends now. Stand down, Commander Varsken. The next move is yours, but understand this. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Humans do not conquer by force. We win by making violence obsolete. Celera listened, tears burning her eyes. She stepped forward. Let me speak, she said. Mara hesitated, then nodded. Celera's image appeared on every screen in the Kevry system. She stood tall despite her injuries. Despite everything. I was beaten because I chose my own life, Celera said. Not power. Not revenge. Just choice. She met the camera without fear. You tried to erase me. Instead, you showed the galaxy who you are. And who you are afraid of. The council chambers erupted into chaos. Varsken stared at the screen, breathing hard. His world, built on dominance, was collapsing without a single human shot fired. This was worse than defeat. This was exposure. Hours later, the council issued the unthinkable order. Stand down. The iron moons powered down. The platform went dark. Varsken was stripped of command before his soldiers' eyes. When human ships finally regrouped, not as conquerors but witnesses, the war was already over. Celera stood beside Eli on the observation deck as stars drifted peacefully again. It's finished, she said. Eli shook his head gently. No. It's changed. She looked at him, really looked. What happens to me now? Eli smiled, soft and real. Whatever you choose. Far away, Commander Varsken sat in a silent chamber, watching guards approach. For the first time in his life, no one bowed. And across the galaxy, a quiet truth settled in. Humanity had not won by destroying an empire. They had won by refusing to become one. And the final chapter had yet to be written. The galaxy did not explode into celebration. That was the strange part. There were no victory parades, no grand speeches, no flags planted on conquered worlds. Human ships did not seize territory. They did not demand tribute. They did not rewrite borders. They simply stayed long enough to make sure the choice remained. In the days after the iron moons powered down, observers from dozens of species arrived in the Kevry system. Investigators, mediators, historians. What they found unsettled them more than any battlefield ever had. An empire had been stopped without being shattered, and it frightened everyone who depended on fear to rule. Celera stood before the Council of Clans one final time, not as a prisoner, not as property, but as a witness. Her injuries had healed enough for her to walk unaided, though the scars remained. She did not hide them. They made her words heavier. You cannot undo what you did, she said calmly. But you can decide what you do next. The elders listened now. Not because they had become kinder, but because they had learned what resistance looked like. Commander Varsken was absent. Officially detained. Unofficially erased from influence. The warlord who once believed himself untouchable had learned the human lesson too late. Power that cannot be questioned is already dying. The council issued reforms they would never have considered before. Bonding laws were suspended. Clan authority weakened. Independent courts established under interstellar oversight. Not perfect, but possible. That was humanity's real weapon. Possibility. When Celera returned to the Cinderknife, Eli was waiting near the hangar, leaning against a crate like he belonged there. You just rewrote history, he said. She exhaled. I didn't do it alone. Eli shrugged. You did the hard part. You survived. Human ships began to depart one by one, slipping back into trade lanes and unexplored routes. They left no garrisons behind. No demands. Just records, evidence, and a reputation. Species across the sector took notice. Not because humans were the strongest, but because they were the most inconvenient to tyrants. Celera stood at the viewport as the last human escort ship disengaged. Her future stretched wide and terrifying and free. Eli joined her. "So," he said, casual as ever, "what do you want to do now?" She didn't answer right away. She thought of the girl she had been, obedient, silent, waiting for permission to exist. Then she thought of what she had seen in humans. Creatures who cross stars not to rule them, but to argue about how to do better. "I want to travel," she said finally. "Learn. Speak. Make sure this never happens quietly again." Eli smiled. "You'll make enemies." "I already have," she replied. "Good," he said. "Means you're doing something right." Months later, stories spread. About a Kevri woman who spoke before councils and crowds. About humans who showed up when someone screamed into the void. About an empire that learned fear wasn't enough anymore. On forgotten worlds and crowded stations, people began to whisper a new truth. If you are crushed, if you are silenced, if you are left for dead, there is a chance, small, stubborn, dangerous, that a human will notice. And if they do, they won't ask who owns you. They won't ask what laws say you deserve. They will ask only one thing. Did you choose this? And if the answer is no, then the universe itself may have to change. Because humanity never fights for power. They fight for the right to say no. And that is the most terrifying force of all.